Hello, it's Matt, Stove and Fireplace Talk. This video is about why the modern Western, or at least North American fireplace absolutely sucks. Is that a technical term? This person is actually building an outdoor fireplace where the back of the firebox angles the bricks in to create some gigantic smoke shelf. Oh, make it stop. Please make it stop. Now, I have to tell you, always do what your code says. Government knows best. Whatever the code says is what you got to do. They'll come and rip it out. I'm just telling you what makes sense and what's completely idiotic and asinine. Always follow the code, which is usually asinine. Here's a picture of the back of somebody's fireplace. Makes sense that you want those back bricks angled in so the smoke can potentially be pushed out into your living room. If you're sitting in your couch trying to enjoy a fire, you want to take a chance to have the smoke pushed out in your face. This is a heck of a design. Very impressive. Somebody's listening to this thing. Who you think you are? You ain't got no ISO certificate. You ain't government approved. Well, see, there was a guy named Count Rumford. He figured this out in the late 1700s. He was a technical and scientific genius. Then everything he figured out, for some reason, because government is so good, is just forgotten about. I'm not saying it. I'm no genius. It's been proven. What I've actually proved in my backyard. I stack bricks up from time to time and see what works. The modern fireplace is idiotic. This guy showed us in 1700. Why did we forget? This is a Count Rumford fireplace, and they still exist in rare places in North America and maybe even in Canada if the government allows it. See, it's got a flat back. The bricks don't angle in and push the smoke out into your living room. And somebody's saying, Count Rumford from the 1700s. What'd he know? They didn't even have flushing toilets. They didn't know shit. Oh, really? I can prove it. We'll see who knows what about what. The modern fireplace is absolute horseshit. Okay, this is a good graphic I found that compares the old Rumford design from the conventional, or what would likely have to be built today via code in at least the United States, or maybe all of North America, including Canada. Here's the angled in bricks on the back of the firebox, the smoke shelf. Not that you're going to build a Rumford, although you probably could, because some of these exist, and there is a precedent that the inspectors have begrudgingly probably approved this because they are in homes that are 80 to 100 years old. So you probably could get the inspectors to sign off on this begrudgingly. I'll say, what's that? What are you trying to do here? Because these things do exist and you could prove there's a precedent versus this horse shit over here. But let's just look at this first. So of course, here's your fireplace. Here's where you load the wood in. The first brick would be here up to the mantle. And then the back of the fireplace starts to angle the bricks in. Now the reason for this is to create a smoke shelf. It is necessary because the design of the chimney is wrong to begin with. It's like a car that doesn't work and you do something to make the bad car work and it was broken to begin with. You have to do this because the design stinks to begin with. Because the chimney is too wide, much too large, wind and cold air can come roaring down. And if it comes down, it'll come down the back here. The idea is you have a roaring fire with the flames and the hot gases being squeezed up through this more narrow opening. The cold gases and cold air from the wind outside comes down, hits the shelf, and then immediately is forced back up and is carried back up by the heat, which wants to rise, and the hot gases. If the chimney is not too wide, you wouldn't have the cold air coming down to begin with. But some people, they move into their home, the chimney's been there 60 years. What are you going to do? Or I understand that. The thing or the problem that happens is sometimes this design is actually decent here because the smoke shelf is much higher than the first brick here. There's a good, in this design, maybe 6, 8, 10 inches between. Sometimes this brick is a little too high up. And if you have cold air rushing down a chimney that's too wide, and you have this turbulence that's created from the fire being pushed forward, it can slip under the brick here and then out into your living room. So this is decent. I mean, you have it low enough where anything that squeezes through which would happen more if the fire's not completely roaring. If it's roaring at 1,000 degrees and it's just, the flames and everything be moving very, very fast through this more narrow space, even if you've got cold air coming down, it's not going to get through. If it starts to die down, that's when you get problems. Flames or logs that are smoldering at the end because the bricks get cold very quickly and there's really just a tiny bit of flame, allows a lot of cold air to come down. And if this smoke shelf isn't much higher than this first brick, then that smoke here can push out into the living room. A lot of people correct this problem or put lipstick on this pig by simply making this lower, this opening. If you make the opening to the fireplace lower, then any smoke that gets collected up here, it's harder to push down and out. The lower this opening gets, also the more the air is squeezed through a smaller, narrow opening, you create more draft, etc. But it's just putting lipstick on a pig. This graphic is very similar. Maybe you can see it a little bit better with this one. The Rumford design here, we'll look at that. The back of the firebox is completely flat. Doesn't angle it in, push the smoke out in your face. It also, this is not necessary, but if you get these pre-manufactured Rumford designs, they have this very smooth, creates what's called a throat here. So it's all smoothly and very, very quickly moving up the chimney. And hopefully, maybe an old house with a Rumford design may have a chimney that's much more narrow, much smaller than the conventional North American chimney. It doesn't allow cold air to get down, cold gases. We'll look at a wood stove in a few minutes sitting in the middle of the living room. It has a pipe going straight up. The pipe is small. It doesn't allow any cold air to get down. Why don't the manufacturers or code surrounding chimneys adopt what works in a wood stove? So the Rumford design is flat back. It does get narrow here just in case some air wants to make its way down. Everybody's chimneys in the 1800s, etc., is going to be a little bit different. It creates its own narrow opening, but it doesn't need this gigantic smoke shelf. Okay, there's a lot of other problems created over here with the smoke shelf. And I'd even mention this, but let me touch on this briefly. I think it's required by code. Above the smoke shelf, and there'd be like a big metal damper over here you can open and close on a North American or U.S. fireplace. It has what's called this big-ass smoke chamber. That's not good for draft either, a big smoke chamber. This big, huge thing, and then it gets narrow and the chimney starts. So when you create a gigantic open space, it's horrible for draft. Draft, think of the end of a rocket or a missile. It gets thin. That creates speed. It's thin in a Russian stove. The smallest channels are called lifting channels, create speed. The giant smoke chamber in a U.S. fireplace, just a bunch of dead air, and cold bricks. That's terrible unless you want to smoke your family out and end Thanksgiving early. So everything here moves much more quickly, flat back. No reason to angle it in. No reason to even have a smoke shelf if your chimney is installed properly. Now, one last time, if you have this house that was built in the 40s and it has some gigantic brick chimney, sure, it was built wrong. You don't have a choice. You need to create some sort of smoke shelf. Why they angle it in like this, I don't know. There's other ways to probably create a smoke shelf, but it's poor design to begin with. But I understand why this is necessary to put the lipstick on the pig. Now we'll look at why a modern fireplace smokes and smokes out the neighborhood, where a wood stove, when you look at above your roof and a wood stove's burning, say after 20, 30 minutes and everything fully heats up, you just see ripples of heat. There's no smoke whatsoever when a wood stove is burning properly. But a fireplace almost always creates smoke. There's somebody a few doors down and you go, oh, jackass is burning his fireplace again, smoking out the neighborhood. It's terrible. Here's what happens. Here it says conventional throat creates turbulence, right? It does. Pushes it. Cold air is coming in here, ice cold air. It's high enough above the flames that it's really not getting warm. When flames and hot gases mix with ice cold air, it like turns to smoke. And all these bricks up here, unless the fire is absolutely raging, if all these bricks get extremely hot, then you have a zone of heat that does end up burning off most of the smoke. Smoke is fuel. High temperatures burns up smoke. But if things cool down, or somebody only puts 2 or 3 small logs on, or it was raging up but now it's dying down, it's just embers, then these bricks, especially with the cold air blowing down from the outside, it's 20 degrees outside and 40-mile-an-hour gusts, these bricks get cold. This gigantic smoke chamber up here gets cold. When hot gases and hot smoke hits cold bricks, it turns to smoke. It turns to thick smoke. Most U.S. or North American chimneys can't stay hot enough unless it's absolutely raging. If everything is, here the Rumford, much thinner design, there's only, I don't know what it might be, 18 inches or so between the beginning of the firebox and the back wall. It's very, very thin. Where a U.S., I don't know, 2.5, 3 feet, much, much larger. Many more bricks that are cold touching hot gases, creating smoke. This is everything's thinner, smaller, more compact, more like a wood stove. And with everything going straight up the back, a high firebox actually helps burn smoke up. A high firebox with the flames lapping up high, those flames lapping up will intermix a bit with smoke, and that smoke will be used as fuel, and there'll be very little smoke outside. Here, the flames are lapping up, but there's so many cold bricks, so many cold areas and zones. It's an absolute nightmare unless you're trying to smoke your neighbors out. But see, the EPA and everything, they're okay with this, but then they're going to get on you for having a wood stove that burns clean. They're okay with, everything is backwards. I don't want to get into. That's not the purpose of this channel. The EPA is okay with this mess, a fireplace in everybody's home, but you can't put in a wood stove. Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks, Al Gore. Okay, here's a wood stove. It just has a small, thin pipe. Most wood stoves have a 6-inch diameter stovepipe. This stove is so small, not the greatest picture. It may be a 4-inch, but they're very small. They just go straight up. And most of these wood stoves, unless there's a baffle that forces everything forward, a lot of times you just open the door when the flames are going and it doesn't smoke back. Again, if there's a baffle that pushes everything forward, then it's not, these stoves are not designed to have the door opened. But the point is, why don't chimneys for fireplaces why aren't they more like this? Smaller, thinner, no cold air can blow down. Because it's so small, it remains hot. The whole thing gets very, very hot very quickly. Helps burn up more smoke, more gases. A fireplace should literally be like a pipe. Now, I don't even know if any code allows this. I found something from This Old House. I guess it must. They did it right on this episode of This Old House. I'll show you a part of that, or at least a few pictures. But this is what works. So your fireplace is completely different. It's wider, a bunch of cold bricks, a bunch of dead air that's not moving, and a giant smoke shelf. Why don't I need the smoke shelf and smoke chamber in this? Rumford knew this in the 1700s, but things have to get worse. Look how terrible these designs are. If any wind is blowing down the chimney that's too big, and if fire is raging again, all the bricks are going to be hot, it's going to draw, it's going to suck, everything's going to be moving so fast, it'll be great. When the fire starts to die down, it's cold, you could have some smoke going up the back, being pushed forward, and then a little puff of wind. The smoke shelf isn't some perfect panacea. Easily smoke, for many people, thousands of people get a little smoked out by their fireplace. It just then dips under the little shelf there on the left, and then comes into your house and ruins your Thanksgiving. If you just make this a flat back, I still think it would be better, even if the chimney's too wide, because you're just letting it go straight up. Okay, I guess I don't mean to be too repetitive on that. Then, incredibly, people do it outside for their outdoor fireplace. Create a smoke shelf. You're out. First off, if once a week or once a year a little puff of smoke comes forward, You're outside. It's a big deal. And it's 50 degrees outside. You're sitting in your lawn chair with your drink. I mean, well, let them do it, Matt. The problem is this can actually create more smoke out, depending on the situation. And people, are put off by the job or the project. Most people can't do masonry and brickwork where it bends forward. It's hard to do. It's not, anybody can stack bricks flat and straight. I mean, this is absurd inside the house. I was just thinking, boy, is there some sort of code for outdoor fireplaces that would require this? A giant smoke shift. Anyway, people do, you can go all over YouTube. They do this on the outdoor fireplaces. I mean, this is ridiculous. Look what I found. There seems to be one video on YouTube of someone that built a Rumford type outdoors, completely flat back. The flames lap up. On a Rumford, you're supposed to stack the wood more like a teepee. If you don't have to. Look at that. No smoke. Look at that. No smoke in the neighbors out. Flat back. Why don't they need a smoke shelf? I'm telling you, it is so unnecessary. Then you find all this stuff from the experts. This guy's giving a lecture on how to build the worst fireplace properly. He's just going by what he's told and the code, and it's all angled in on the back. And I kind of like this diagram. It shows how not to do it. He has the blue arrows coming down. That's the ice cold air in the chimney that's been built too wide. And then the ice cold air then is looping and mixing with the hot gases. And then somebody sees these sorts of lectures from these people that have no idea what they're doing. Just they were told to do it by the guy before. They never really thought about it. And then it says they're 22 inches. That's when you start to angle the back of the fireplace at 22 inches. Then people say, it's got to be 22 inches. Then we got to angle it back. And they just do it, and they have no idea really. Look, I guess I shouldn't blame them. How would they know, right? Have they spent thousands of hours playing around with bricks and watching videos and building stuff in their backyard like some sort of nut like me? I don't blame them, I guess. But it's just one guy carries on what's wrong because the guy before him. And these do work in most cases. I mean, obviously, in most cases, you just light the fireplace, and it will work in most cases. But I'm just telling you, there are thousands of people that have had over many, many decades. Thousands have had smoke issues with their fireplace and little issues that could have easily been rectified. Some people have to put fans. They actually build these fans. They don't build them for no reason. Fans that go at the top of your chimney to help the draft. I mean, why would they sell these products if these things were all drafting properly? If you just incorporated some basic design elements like the Rumford, the chimney fans and the manufacturers, they wouldn't sell even one. Now, this solution from a This Old House video actually makes sense. This Old House, the old TV show about home improvements on US PBS before the internet. Apparently it's still around. This old fireplace, open fireplace from the 20s or 30s or 40s, they line the brick with this stainless steel liner. That's 10 inches or 12 inches, I'm not sure. You can find the video at This Old House. And then they insulate around it. So there's no smoke shelf. No, I don't know how This Old House is able to do this. The code and everything doesn't like this, does it? Maybe it does if you use the proper liner. But this solution actually makes sense. Here they're just feeding it down the top of the brick chimney. There is no more brick chimney. The chimney now is the liner. And as that liner gets hot, it'll get hot very, very quickly, just inside a few minutes, where these bricks take a long time to get hot. Heat in the length of a chimney creates draft. The hotter, and especially I think in this video, they insulate around the liner. So an incredible draft is created in just 1 or 2 minutes. As everything gets hot, the pull, the drag, and the suction increases exponentially. And it's small and narrow, so there's no cold air that's going to blow down. When a house is built, you don't even, this is the way a chimney should be built. This is a good picture. You're back down in the living room looking into the fireplace, putting your head in the fireplace, looking up. They've lowered the liner. It's one continuous piece all the way down from the top. They've secured it at the top. It'll come out above the roof, of course. That mesh he's putting around, I guess nailing around, he's not going to trowel cement on that. It would be like some sort of refractory product, like I think it's called Prior Fire. I was going to say Area 51. No, Formula 51. It's like Area 51. It's a parging product for smoke chambers to smooth everything out. It's like putting concrete on a trowel, but it's good to 1500 or 2000 degrees. So he'll seal all that up. So in this case, there's no smoke chamber. I guess, this old house, they know what they're doing regarding the code that would be required. Maybe all that smoke chamber stuff and smoke shelf stuff is not required if you decide to line it. But this would be so much better. I think they insulate this liner too, which makes the draft even that much better. An insulated liner, the draft is ridiculously good. I think they pour some sort of cement around it or fill the whole brick chimney up. But there's different ways of doing it. If it would stay dry, it could be stuffed with a mineral wool insulation. That doesn't burn, or it's good to like 2,000 degrees. You could use perlite, pour vermiculite, mix, there's all sorts of options. Mixing perlite with soil, part concrete. I mean, but obviously, you're stuck with this forever if you use a cement compound. But insulating that liner, the draft is going to be so good because the liner is going to get hot in less than a minute. And you don't need a smoke shelf. See, you don't need all that nonsense. It'll just, like a wood stove, it'll pull the flames up and the smoke up so fast that this person, if they did have any issue with smoking or smoke out into the living room, it will never happen again. You insulate your chimney. You create a chimney that's the proper size, but a little bit more narrow than you would think, and then you insulate. You make sure it stays warm, and that's what creates draft, and that eliminates 99% of everybody's problems. And I'll close with this. This guy in his outdoor fireplace probably didn't know what he was doing. Found this thing called Rumford, just creates 3 angles and a flat back. And they usually do stack the wood up like a teepee. And he's just got some cinder blocks as his chimney, and there's no smoke. And it just goes right up. He didn't need no angled in bricks. He didn't need no smoke chamber. Oh my gosh, this just works. How did we lose this in the United States? Interesting.